Oh, Howie. Okay, it's 6:30 on Tuesday the 24th of March 2026, and I'm going to convene another meeting of the Resources Committee at Basingstoke Council. Welcome councillors and officers. My name's John Isaac, I'm the committee chairman. I'll just go through the usual preliminaries. If the fire alarm goes, it's for real, so we need to evacuate the building. The meeting is being webcast, so anyone will be able to view it on YouTube after the meeting. Could you make sure you speak too closely into the microphones? Mobile phones switched off or silent, please. Right. If I turn to the agenda, find that. There we go. Yep. So, first item on the agenda is any apologies for absence and substitutions. Do we have any? We have. We don't have Hannah Golding with us this evening because she's stepped down as a councillor. But we thank her for her contribution to the committee and to the council generally over 10 years, and wish her well in the future. Next, declarations of interest. Anyone? No. Sorry? Declarations of interest. No. Right. Okay. Item 3 on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting that we held on the 20th of January. I'd like to thank the officers for responding to the various points that were raised by the committee and giving us some detailed responses to the questions we raised. I think it's important that the work of the committees is acknowledged by officers and portfolio holders, and that we get answers to the questions we raise. So that's a positive outcome. Any questions on those responses? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one point of clarification and then one question, if possible. So the first point of clarification was the 13th of February actions email as referred to. There's a helpful response on the question of flag protocol, but I don't think it was quite the answer to the question the committee were asking. It refers to flags within the borough, which we've seen, but I think the question was about whether this borough council has a flags protocol document, and I think that's the document that the committee are keen to see. So I think it would be useful if, as a follow-up to this meeting, that document could be circulated. And then the second point was in relation to the...
Sorry, just before we move on to that then, because I think the answer we got was about the police's position on flags, wasn't it? Is there a flags protocol, Katie, do we know, that could be shared?
Yes, we do have one, and sorry, I didn't understand that that's what was required from the discussion that we had, but I will circulate that.
Good. Carry on.
Thank you, Katie. That's really very helpful. And then the second point is in relation to the breakdown of streets cleansing spend and where that's been going in recent years and how that's been prioritised. There was, I think, a curious confusion in how that was presented. So the position put was that rural areas are getting their fair share of that sort of multi-million-pound street cleansing scheme. And then the focus in the breakdown in 2025 was a series of town wards, looking at Brookvale, Buckskin, Eastrop, etc. And then the promise in the email was that there would be greater focus on rural areas in 2026. And yet when that breakdown then followed, it referred to more town wards, Kempshott and Buckskin and Hats Warren and so on. There was a reference to Tantley and Bramley. That's good. But I think the question I have is about the rationale for how the quite significant amount of money that's being invested in street cleansing, how that is being decided upon. What is the rationale? What is the matrix for prioritising how that money is spent? I think that would be useful to understand.
Okay, so are you suggesting that we get a written answer to that, or are we looking for any answer from perhaps the leader this evening on that point?
Whichever the administration prefer, but I do think it would be useful to get clarification about those decision making and what's driving it.
Happy to provide a written response.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important because obviously the rural population, I think, is sort of some 50% of the overall population of the borough. So we do need to keep an eye on where money is being spent by the local council.
I think we should look at it across a period of time, because I would say that a few years ago a lot of money was spent in the rural areas rather than the town. So I think we shouldn't just look at one issue. It should be looked at how much is being spent over a period, because you spend money, as you say, and then you go on to a following year. But if you don't look back, you can't see where the money's been spent.
Yeah, this is all about current expenditure, though, really, isn't it? And how far back do you look on these things? Perhaps we can leave it to the good judgment of the leader and the officers to come up with an answer on that, rather than getting bogged down in that. But you make a good point. Okay. Councillor Hussey.
Chair, the interpretation of the agenda and how the meeting is managed is entirely up to you. I recognise that. But this agenda item says the only part of the minutes that can be discussed is their accuracy. And we've gone into debate. Is that the normal format for this meeting?
I think if we've been provided answers to questions that we've raised, and then councillors have got further questions, I think that's quite a legitimate thing to ask. We've now dealt with the issue, and I think we've got some further work that will come from it. Okay, we can't always be clear that the answers we're going to get to the questions we raise are going to be as complete as we would like. Right. So, are we happy that I can approve the minutes of the 20th of January? Okay, good. All right, thank you. Right, now moving swiftly on to agenda item number 4. This is the Q3 key performance indicator review, and we're going to invite the leader, who is going to speak to it. He's also the cabinet member for service transformation improvement, but we haven't got those are amber scores, but we haven't this time. The first time I can remember, actually, we have no scores that are red, i.e. that that they've not been met at all. So that's a positive outcome, and the officers generally are to be congratulated as far as that's concerned. Paul, would you like to start by introducing the report, please?
Thank you, John. And it is a good report because it's the third quarter in a row that we haven't had any red indicators. So in terms of the officer team and the work that's being done, it is showing not only that we are on track to meet a significant number of our targets and our policies in the council plan, but actually we've exceeded many of them. So it's 42 of the 49 indicators are either green or exceeded for the third quarter in a row, and that's strong performance. So I want to thank the officer team and every member of the team, all of the staff, for the quality and the effort that's being put in to delivering those services. It's reflected in the positive comments we get. but we never sit back on rest on our laurels. The whole point of maintaining the standard is that you constantly improve, and we are an improving organisation, and we constantly want to learn. And as part of that relationship that we have with our residents, it's about understanding where we can improve and better the services we have. You see that in the quality that's delivered. So it's the third quarter in a row where there's been no red indicators, and that is incredibly positive progress. So I thank the team for what they're doing. In terms of the specific indicators, I thank members for their comments last quarter, last time we sat around the table, and I noted, Councillor Golding's comments, her last comments before she left the council, in being incredibly positive about what the officer team had delivered and the quality of what was being delivered. So I thank her for that. And we have a really good, positive message and story to tell. And I look forward to any questions that you have this evening.
Right, does any member want to say anything in more general terms about the quarter three review, or are we happy to ask Katie to give us any further background? Shall we do that next? Katie, is there anything you want to say? Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, just building on what the leader was saying, we've got around 86% of our measures either on track or exceeding. No missing data in this last quarter. One other thing I would just add that it was raised at our last meeting was around the presentation on some of the measures, so the size of some of the graphics and also the use of our traffic light system to denote red, amber, green. So we've been working on the template, so we propose for quarter four you'll see a new streamlined template where we use the header to define the RAG status and so on. Just gives more room for things to be more easily seen and clearer to read. So yes, I would only really echo the comments that have been made around the effort put into these. So I'll hand back over to the chair now.
Right, thank you, Katie. If we're going to look at the those KPIs that have got an amber scoring, not quite met, and I think I just make the comment that there are a couple that relate to the finance team, but in both cases they're missed very narrowly on technical grounds, and therefore the Chief Financial Officer Adam Swain has not been invited here this evening, and so I hope that's okay. So the first KPI that is in this category is KPI 2.1, which is the household waste recycling rate. And if I could ask Helen Taylor-Cobb to come up, please.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee. So the performance indicator that you have before you, I think if you look at it compared to last year, you'll see that it's a seasonal trend. So if you remember, the waste is always a quarter behind the other targets because we wait for contamination figures to come in from Hampshire County Council. Having received that, therefore, this is just a reminder that these rates are based on the July to September period. So you might remember that we had the hottest summer on record last summer. It seems like a very long time ago now, but it was the hottest summer on record. We had 4 heat waves in July and August, and so what you'll see here is fewer people cutting their grass, and when they are cutting their grass, the grass is going to be lighter, it's going to have less water content, and that's why you see that indicator slightly below, but you will see that it is on trend to the same time last year. The other KPI in my area is 2.11, which is kilogram of waste per household monthly average, and that was an
Helen,
exceed.
that doesn't seem to be an amber category. So
No, that's an exceed, yeah.
Yeah,
So are there any questions in reference to the recycling rate?
Yeah, I'm just for everyone's benefit and those listening at home, can you just say what the actual target is, and to what extent it's being missed at the moment?
Yeah, so the target is 32%, and that's actually an annual target. And we're on this reading, I think, at 29.84%. And you will see that the same quarter in the previous year. I think was at 30.9. So it depends whether we have a wet summer or a dry summer as to what the implications are in the growing season, and it very much dramatically impacts the weight of the garden waste.
Okay, so we're looking to, our target is to achieve recycling of 32%. What is the sort of government requirement?
So can I come back to you in terms of the current target? I think under the Environment Act 21, that target's been extended. If I can just check my notes for 2 seconds. We've got 2 new targets coming up. One is in 2035 and the other is in 2042. One of them is for waste and the other is for recycling. And I can't quite remember which date is which, but I'm happy to clarify all of that for committee.
I was really asking what the current government target is.
I'll come back and confirm that with committee.
Okay. Any members, anyone else got any questions for Helen?
It's only a quick one on the garden waste, really. Well, it went up last year. Has it affected the amount of people taking up garden waste? Is the point of it?
We've actually had an increase in garden waste numbers year on year. So we've got really good uptake on the numbers. We absolutely normally see the Q2 number drop. Yeah. But no, in terms of our current numbers, I think we're about the 17,300 subscribers.
Right, Helen, I think that's it for the moment. Oh, no, so I do apologise, Councillor.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question in relation to the discussion of the food waste collection service, which of course is very much pitched here as the way we can improve the delivery of this action. I wondered if you had any sort of initial figures on the take-up of that. Are there any sort of patterns in where it's being picked up well, where it's not being? Are there sort of demographic or geographic elements to that? And then I have one other question after that.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. Yes, so in terms of where we are at the moment, initial indications for the first few months of the service show that we've taken 1,065 tonnes of food waste. So that's about 177 elephants, I think is what we put in our press release. So that would indicate that we have got good participation rates. In terms of, we are doing a piece of work at the moment where, the waste and recycling officers are divided geographically around the borough. So we're doing an audit at the moment of 200 properties in each of those areas, which is a complement of individual properties and flatted developments. We're reviewing those 3 weeks running to ascertain what the put-out rates look like, what the participation rates look like. It might be that some households don't actually need to use their food waste week in, week out, but they might present every other week. So that's how we're going to review participation rates. And the idea is later in the year, we'll repeat that as well, just to see if we can see any common denominators around participation.
Thank you. That sounds like a really interesting piece of work. I think we all want to see greater recycling in the borough. We all want to get there. But of course, one of the questions is about how we get there and the order in which we make certain changes. So one of the things that I'm a little bit sceptical about is the borough's made a decision to withdraw weekly waste collection for sort of black bins. And we're doing that ahead of some of that data coming forwards around the take-up of food waste that we've been talking about, but also some of the changes to plastics recycling that the county are helping to facilitate from 2028. And I just wonder whether moving forwards with that change away from weekly collections before some of those other changes, some of that other data is in place, what the rationale for that is, because there's something in there for me about whether we're doing things in the right order.
So I think one of the things that we recognise is that at the moment about 25% of what is going into our black bins could actually be recycled and isn't being. So I think there is some really important work there. We know that residents are really keen to recycle more, and that's regular feedback that we get through our social media channels. So I think being able to assist that is really important. And I think in terms of the changes that are coming down the line with Hampshire's new infrastructure, that will obviously help with pots, tubs and trays. So whilst you might argue that they take up a lot of space, they don't actually weigh a lot, they're compact very quickly. So we don't have any limitations at all to the number of bins that people can request for recycling. So we would advise people that the more you recycle, the more you take out of your black bin. Please just contact us and request another recycling bin, and we can help facilitate, therefore, you having some additional capacity, but in the right area, because it's that recycling additional capacity that is better than the black bins. And we know that the bulk of the waste in the black bins tends to come from the food waste. That's about 1/3 of the bin weight. So actually getting that out of the bins reduces things like smelly food, and that continues to be a weekly collection service. So that's a new service.
Yes, please do.
Just on the food recycling, where the high density areas, you're doing a survey, but the problems we've had with 2 bins is a lot of them go missing because people are at work, they're pulling them a long way from their properties. And I just wondered, that needs to be looked at, if I'm honest with you, because what we don't want is kids getting hold of them and kicking the food waste around the. It hasn't happened yet. I shouldn't mention it now, but it could well. We've lost a lot of bins in the past, and I do wonder. I know the contract's out already done, but whether we could actually look at some of these places where they're having problems getting their black and green bins out without anything else. You know, they're blocking pavements, causing problems for people with pushchairs and prams and disabled. There's an issue there that's never, I've raised it in the past, but we've never really looked at it as a council, what we can do about it.
So I think the challenge that we have there is that this is a statutory function that we are mandatorily required to offer to residents through the Environment Act. And therefore what we try to advise residents to do is the food caddy that you present at the curbside, it's perfectly possible to stand that on top of another bin if you're constrained on space. So I think it's something that we recognise, particularly in some of our narrow access areas. We do actually offer, where there are restricted access, there are a limited number of properties where we have audited them, and for reasons of space, they are actually still on a SAC service. So where residents say to us, we've got genuine concerns about the size of bins and our ability to present them, we do actually go and do an inspection alongside the resident. And where that is the case, we will actually look to give them a SAC'd option so that they don't have those constraints.
I just quickly come back. I'm not getting into argument. The problem with SACs, we've had them in, obviously when it first kicked off years back, that if you've got a restricted area, they're worse than having bins, if you know what I mean. So I just really would like officers to look at the actual what we can do, where we're pulling bins out quite away from people's properties, and where they're blocking pavements and everything else. It's not just on the estates, it's even in the town area. When you actually look at it, they're pulling bins out, and you can't, you know, if you've got a pushchair, disabled, people cannot get down the paths, and we've never really looked at it, but it's something perhaps we should do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. Thank you. No, Councillor Hussey.
I've just got a couple of observations. One is on grass cutting. At times of prolonged dry weather, you're encouraged not to cut your grass, to keep it longer, as it protects. So that's one reason also why the food waste recycling a couple of years ago, their experience was, so in future measures, I'd like you to look at that to see how we could factor that in if we are really successful in changing people's habits.
Thank you, Ron. Okay. Gary, Councillor Watts.
Thank you. I do understand the garden waste dropping down, but have you got any data on ever recycling through that period of like plastics and glass and paper? How was that compared to previous years?
So I can see if we can obtain any information. I think the challenge is that all of the recycling goes across the weighbridge as a set standard item. I do believe that we have some streams that are brought out of that. So if it's okay, if I can come back to the committee with any specific waste stream data that I have.
Okay, well, thank you, Helen, for now. Could I ask Jenny Jackson to join us, Head of Planning? Now, committee members, I'm told that Jenny has to get to a choral practice this evening, and if she doesn't get to it, then she that might be the end of her choral career. So I think, would you all agree that it would be a sort of noble thing to do to ask Jenny to address this topic, but also to jump into the next agenda item, where she's got one area to cover, and which I don't think is sort of going to cause much. It's fairly open and shut, I think. Was that agreed? Good, thank you, Jenny. So, could you speak to KPI 3.33, and that's the how we're doing in terms of minor planning applications determined within statutory timelines, what the target is, and by how much we're missing it, and what we're doing about it.
Thank you, Chairman, and committee as well for allowing me to do that. It's very kind of you. Appreciate it. So KPI 3.33, Chair, as you said, relates to non-major development. So the government target is that more than 70% of non-major applications should be determined within 8 weeks. And our local indicator is a stretch target of 85% of non-major applications determined within 8 weeks. And we are currently in Q3 at 83.7%. As you'll see from the papers in front of you, I think it's page 50, we've been around the 83% mark for Q1, Q2 and Q3. And in large part, this relates to the fact that two of our very experienced assistant planning managers, Sue Tarvett and Lisa Sowden, retired during Q1. And obviously it's taken us a little bit of time to recruit, to replace those posts, which we have done successfully, for the two new officers, Christine Ellerer and Lorna Hutchins, to sort of get up to speed, if you like, with processing applications. So I would anticipate a further increase in performance in Q4, but it may still result in us not quite achieving this stretch target of 85% across the year to date.
Right, thank you. Any questions? Just one thing. I'd be grateful for clarification, because there's this distinction between the 8 week statutory period and sometimes what's agreed between the parties. So is your measure always against the 8 week statutory, or is it a measure against what's been agreed, which may be more than 8 weeks, presumably?
So yes, Chair, you can use extensions of time where you agree that mutually with the applicant or their agent to allow the any issues with the application to be resolved to achieve obviously a positive outcome. And bearing in mind that this category includes householder applications in the borough, so where we can, we do try and work with residents to make sure that schemes can be amended to avoid them having to submit a second application. So those extensions of time are accounted for in that data. So if you've agreed a time period, then that's considered by the government and obviously by ourselves as being in time for the purposes of reporting.
Okay. Is it possible to get data which distinguishes between the 8 weeks that and those where there's been an extension of time?
It is recorded because it's published on the government's live statistics tables. Yes, we have actually been trying to decrease the number of extensions of time as an authority because the government indicated it may remove that ability.
Right.
So we wanted to try and prepare ourselves for that eventuality. Well, but that's something I can look at.
Could you let us have that?
And let the committee have that information.
Councillor Carr.
There we go. Mr. Chairman, I had a question about whether there's something missing from the KPI sections on planning. We've got KPIs on development management, on appeals, on the local plan, but what I actually don't see is a KPI on enforcement. And actually, that's a pretty critical area for many of us across the boroughs. Many of us as ward councillors will have encountered enforcement issues, infringements of planning, breach of planning conditions, and often they can either be quite complicated or they can take quite some time. But it doesn't look to me like we have a measure as part of these KPIs to sort of target how quickly we want to turn those around. Because in as much as there are some big enforcement questions that are quite complicated, there are lots of small and simple infractions that probably go through the system, I guess. So I guess my question is, how could we be recording that? Are we recording that? Should we have a KPI on enforcement?
If I may, Chair, through you, that is something that we do currently look to measure within the service in terms of enforcement caseloads in particular, which I have to say are ever increasing. So year on year we get more requests around potential breaches of planning control. But one of the things you'd have to reflect, I think, in that indicator is the fact that our adopted local enforcement statement prioritises cases. So if you were just looking at how many cases have we received, how many cases have we closed, then you would fail to capture the complexity of some of those cases. So currently we prioritise them, I think they're actually in 5 categories, and obviously we would look to focus our resources on the most important ones of those cases. So that might be works to a listed building, so some of the things that are criminal offences, rather some of the lower priority issues which might end up being boundary disputes between residents. So a large majority of what the team considers are actually closed as no further action because they're not breaches of planning control. So just based on experience in other places, if the committee is minded, I'm willing to explore what enforcement measures might be possible. I would just guard against a bit of a blunt-edged tool that doesn't actually tell you the whole picture of the work that's involved. Some of our enforcement cases are very complex, Councillor Carr, and they do take an awful lot of time and resource, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seems to me that it takes up quite a lot of time on my part now, and as a ward councillor, so it might be something that this committee might consider as a topic in its own right in the future. But in the meantime, if you have any thoughts in relation to a KPI that would be workable, then I think as a committee would we agree that would be something we would encourage for the future. Julian?
Yes, thinking of my background about 40 years ago in the days of steam computing, this sort of thing in computing terms, if you had many jobs working at different priorities, there came a point where you said a low priority job should be bumped up to a higher priority, and we may have to develop some similar sort of algorithm to handle with this, because I know there have been some cases which have gone on for years.
Yeah, it's news to me that we have a priority approach to this sort of thing. So again, that's something that would be worth exploring. Okay, any further questions for Jenny on this particular topic? Right. Okay, so we're going to sort of jump to the next agenda item just for this for this one officer, please, and that is in relation to the officer's proposals for changes to the KPIs for the year ahead, 26-27, and you've got one in that category, haven't you, Jenny? So could you just speak to that, and then we can let you go.
I'm now trying to find it in the papers, of course, Chairman, sorry. So it relates to the total number of affordable homes. And currently, the KPI says literally that, the total number of new affordable homes completed. And the current target is just referenced as the target as found in the annual plan. So we thought it would be helpful to bring the target in the annual plan, which is a numerical figure of 300 units, into the key performance indicator. So it's not a change as such, Chair, but a clarification, I think, that tells you in the key performance indicator that 300 homes, 300 new affordable homes is the annual target, and that's what we're monitoring performance against.
Yeah, which seems sort of logical and clearer. So does anyone have any sort of questions or issues about that? Councillor Watts.
Thank you. Why haven't you used the percentage? If our housing number goes up, surely the percentage should go up. Shouldn't have a flat rate.
I didn't set the number in the annual plan, is my response, I'm afraid. So the planning policy is obviously 35% of all new homes that are delivered through development, but all new affordable homes aren't actually secured through development. They come through other routes as well. So it can be conversions to affordable homes, it can be changes in tenure. So registered providers do buy market properties for sale and convert them into affordable units. So there isn't actually a correlation necessarily between the total number of new affordable homes year on year and what's secured through planning policy. So if you wanted to know what the percentage was, that is set out in the annual authority monitoring report, which we compile in December every year. So that would tell you the number of affordable units that have been delivered across the last monitoring year, which ends on the 31st of March. I think last year, just from recollection, we delivered something like 700 homes, but a greater than 35% of those were affordable units, because we have some quite strong pipelines of existing consents. So I guess it's sort of what information you're trying to get to. Councillor Watts.
It's about a target, isn't it, really? And is it 300 as a minimum? Is that what we're saying here? Or is it a percentage figure that we're looking for?
I'm going to complicate things, Chair, further by saying there is a different monitoring period in the housing strategy, which we also report against. So at the moment, we have two different periods, and we're reporting on both of them in relation to housing, affordable housing provision. I'm not sure it's in a key performance indicator. I think it comes up separately in the annual review of the housing strategy. So I think it is worthy of consideration for the future as to what is the baseline information that we would like to use to assess that from, and what are we trying to report? I mean, and do we want to refine that? Dare I suggest, do you want to know how many socially rented affordable homes have been delivered in the year, and how many shared ownership or other affordable tenures?
Well, we're looking for a straightforward target for as a KPI. Councillor Connor.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I'm a bit confused because a KPI, as my colleague has said, should be a percentage target. Because if we make it a numerical target, then that's ultimately subjective. Whereas if you say a percentage should be affordable, you know, new builds should be affordable, or however the algorithm works to count the number of affordable houses made available, it's the percentage overall. It's the percentage of what the stock is. Surely. Sorry.
So if the percentage of the total number of homes to be provided, if you wanted that as a percentage of 35%, that would be 297.5 affordable homes.
So the two marry up.
Broadly marry up.
So are we saying that we're happy with 300?
No, I'm not. No, I mean, our target for affordability is 40%. And I think on many down, it's going up to 50, if I remember rightly. We've got a target of 300. That doesn't quantify in my brain. So I think we should be percentage 40%.
I don't remember many down being at 50%, but is a percentage as the basis for the KPI one that's workable?
It's workable, although the other KPI it's linked to is based on a numerical figure, because the total number of homes is a numerical figure that's set in the local plan. I will probably
there's a relationship there. Then
there is a relationship there, yes. So 40% of the current total number of homes is 340, I think, units. But 40% of the local housing need figure is 460 units.
Paul?
I'm just conscious of comparing apples and pears here and being very careful. I think, bearing in mind the comments this evening and well received and well understood and well respected, let's take this away and think about this. If it's a hard fact figure relating to the housing strategy as different to the 40% relating to the local plan policy relating to the AMR that's produced every year, let's just confirm. And then one, there's a policy direction, which is we want as many affordable homes as we can possibly get. That's a simple statement of desire and policy. The actual figures, and actually the council's been excellent at delivering the 40% for quite some time. So the 40% figure within plans approved has been relatively successful. We've also upped the figure to get back to the 300 annual with the pipeline. So actually the amount of socially rented housing coming through, for example, is increasing. The amount of social shared ownership is also increasing. But that also relates to the behaviour of the housing associations in relation to 106 as opposed to buying straightforward stock. So their behaviour is a key part of this as well. Very happy to take this offline. I mean, what we want is the most accurate and the most relevant figure to assess and be held against a KPI.
Yes, because the percentage can fluctuate with delivery, whereas a fixed number is one that you either meet or you don't, and therefore there's some certainty around that. So yes, perhaps if you could go away sorry, Councillor Hussey, before I start summing up.
I'm going to argue against you, Chairman. The basis is that what you're measuring is variable. Mm-hmm. If you have one application for 20,000 homes as opposed to 200 applications for the same number of homes, then the percentages, some of them will be exempt from having to allocate affordable homes. So the numbers depend on whether you have lots of little applications or one major application. The percentages stay the same. That's the only fixed amount. And that means in a year when you have major applications approved, the target for affordable homes will be high. And in the years when you have lots of minor applications, 50 houses or whatever, then the number of affordable units will drop. So it depends. You're not in charge of the number of houses that you agree. You're only in charge of the percentages. So you can't control the numbers. The applicants control the numbers, not us.
No, but that's planning policy. What I'm arguing about is the number of homes the actual delivered by the borough. But I think we could ask the officers and the leader come back to us on that with their views on how this should be defined as a KPI. Unless you want to say anything further.
I was just going to add to the point to what Councillor Hussey is relevantly saying. Don't forget, we have had significant delivery of permitted development in the past few years. You can see it around the town centre, none of which delivered affordable housing. So it's the application that you're presented with on the one case, which is the planning point, which is the percentage, the housing debate, which is a different debate entirely in terms of the target related to affordable housing. It is a different debate in another. So we just need to be careful we're not confusing ourselves, apples and pears here. So I think it's important to do so, but it's also to give the committee the context that this is going to be set in.
Yes, thank you, and I accept this is relates to planning and not housing per se, and therefore, yes, if we're all agreed, then we'd like some reconsideration of this. But I think the percentage view is a very firm consideration as far as this committee is concerned. All right.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Okay. I was tempting fate by suggesting that was going to be straightforward, but I hope it doesn't affect your vocal cords. Right. If we can return to agenda item 4, and the next amber score is KPI 3.29, and that's the total average work days lost by the organisation due to sickness absence. And so, Sarah.
It's back 2 from the last one.
So, Sarah Cragg, thank you for being with us tonight. Can you just explain what the target is and the extent to which it's being missed and why?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, committee. So the sickness for Q3 was 2.10 days, compared with a target of 1.95 days per quarter. So we're 0.15 days above the target. So this is only very marginally over that target that was set, but it's important to say that sickness remains an area of focus for us always, but we have particularly been working hard in this area recently. So the Council's sickness policy has been completely rewritten to ensure the process is as clear and effective as possible, and that's following feedback from focus groups with managers across the organisation who use the policy regularly, as well as engagement with Unison as our recognised trade union. And that policy went to March's HR committee for approval. So we're currently in the process of delivering policy briefings to managers across the organisation in advance of the new policy going live on the 1st of April. In addition to this, the HR team deliver a half-day managing sickness absence course for managers, which has been updated to reflect the new policy. So in terms of the reasons that has been missed, we've got just under half of sickness related to long-term sickness and just over half related to short-term sickness, and the determiner between the two is 20 days absence. There are, as you can imagine, a whole range of different reasons for that sickness, but we continue in line with our current policy, and especially we will do in line with our new policy, to actively support managers to manage that sickness appropriately across the organisation, using all the interventions that we have available to support, such as occupational health, counselling service and our employee assistance programme.
Right, thank you very much for your answer. Right, questions? No, I was just struck by the fact that we're not missing the target by much at the moment, aren't we? So we're pretty close to to scoring green.
And very unusually for us, it's exactly the same sickness rate as we had in Q2, which has never happened before, but it's just one of those vagaries around the data. So again, last quarter we also missed it by that 0.15 of a day.
Right, thank you, Sarah. Now we're going to move on to Many Down South and Many Down Parcel 6A and the lead officer, Andrew Reynolds. Andrew, could you speak to this, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So I think, just to be clear, the target, or the way this is presented, we're not actually behind target. So whilst we report an amber, both on Many Down South and Parcel 6A, and as the Q3 data was published, the Many Down South project was on programme in terms of its preparation for Reg 18 submission and progressing towards Reg 19, and in terms of its spend against budget. So in terms of those particular factors that affect our project, we remain on programme. The amber is triggered primarily because we have quite a sophisticated risk assessment and risk management tool that sits behind the overall project. And when we begin to review those risks and manage those risks, then clearly we do hit a range of amber issues. And those are normally sort of typical for a large-scale project such as Many Downs. So one of those will be transport, because we have a transport piece of work stream. We don't have a complete outcome from that because the programme isn't sort of timed to give us an outcome yet. But clearly there are a number of variables in the work that we do, and therefore we class that as an amber risk at the moment. The other we would class as an amber risk is looking at infrastructure cost planning. So again, as we do the master plan and we look at the infrastructure cost planning and viability work that is currently ongoing, there are a number of variables in that would trigger an amber position for us. So how we then aggregate those risk assessments, then ultimately it still leads us to an overall rating of amber. I think I couldn't sit here with you, Chairman, and say that everything is absolutely perfect in the world of Many Down and that it would be a green rating. So a project of this scale clearly has a number of elements that we would regard as amber, but they are not ones which require treatment. They are just identified by us as a project team to show that we are managing those risks.
Thank you. Any questions? Julian.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Basically, my understanding of this is the Many Down South is basically in two sections. Will this KPI be able to show the progress of each of those sections, or the combined sections, or have I misunderstood it completely?
It's a good question. We did sort of split Parcel 6A away from Many Down South because Parcel 6A is an allocated site within the current local plan. Many Down South is currently being promoted, but the two elements of the site will come together as part of development.
I understand the 6A section, which is to the north of Pack Lane. But there's a significant section surely to the south of Pack Lane, and then another one which is by Junction 7. Or how, as I say, have I misunderstood?
So I think you're referring to our adjacent landowner who we're working collaboratively with, who is the Society of Merchant Venturers.
That's the second near Junction 7, but I'm saying loosely. But I understood there was also some on the town side of the ridge line, which is not part of 6A. Is that not the case?
Yes, so just for clarity, as if you go from Many Down North, is committed development site underway with Urban and Civic as part of the partnership, so that is performing as we speak. As you move across the railway line, you hit parcel 6A, yep. Then you have Pack Lane, then we move into what we classify as Many Down South, which is still in the council's joint ownership. And then beyond Many Down South, as you move down towards Junction 7, we're working with the adjacent landowners, the Society of Merchant Venturers. So we're currently promoting the council's proportion of the land at Many Down South for approximately 4,500 homes.
Yes, I'm still not absolutely sure that I'm clear. I understand the merchant venturers part of the land, but on the council's land, on Many Down South, are you saying there is no development and that the only development is on 6A?
There's no development on Many Down South because that's part of the promotion. So as we've promoted it through the Regulation 18 process, Parcel 6A is allocated. Then Many Down North, which is above the railway line going north.
Okay, actually, if I could now ask on 6A, given that there is development, I guess the leisure, the Great Wolf development, which is likely to have some impact on the transport access and activity on that site, and indeed redevelopment of Winklebury and that. Do we see any understanding of the interaction of all those projects?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we have done considerable technical work of both Pack Lane, Five Ways, B3400, and the access junctions moving up through to connect with Great Wolf. So we have undertaken quite a detailed assessment from our perspective as the landowner to understand the scale of development that could be delivered as part of a first phase, not all the development, but just a first phase from Many Down South and from Parcel 6A through Five Ways Junction and beyond. So we have undertaken those assessments.
Okay. My problem, Andrew, with this is that these are hugely significant projects for the borough, and a lot of interest in them and a lot of expectation. But if you're looking at this as a KPI, then there's no sort of clear, discernible targets that are set out. So it's each time we meet, it's sort of anybody's guess whether it's going to be green, yellow, or red. And I don't think that's sort of particularly satisfactory, really. And I, given that we're looking at a sort of target over a year, I struggle to understand why we can't have at least one or two key objectives that we can measure against the extent to which they've been delivered. Now, I may have got that. I may be being simplistic and naive in that, but could you give me an answer to that question?
I think, Chair, it's a good question. I think we've spoken internally with regard to how we would present data, and potentially I think looking ahead would be what milestones we would measure against. So what are the key milestones? There's a whole variety, but I mean there are some very fundamental milestones that exist within these major projects. So we could articulate those particular milestones for which we can then measure against, rather than sitting here at the moment, as you say. I mean, we sit here on a risk-based AMBER assessment, but it doesn't really tell you very much. And actually having something that is more meaningful, that is measured around a milestone, may provide a better insight into the performance of the project.
Well, I think it would be consistent with what else goes on with the other KPIs across the council. Otherwise, this is just a sort of update on a programme, and certain things have moved, and there may be very good reasons why they've moved, but it's not really enabling us to just determine whether the performance has been achieved. So I think that would, if the committee agrees, I think we would welcome that change to the way that this and other major projects are measured under the KPI system. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Chairman. I'd like to see a KPI about when we're actually going to see houses being built on the site. I've been around too long, I know, but I was there at the original, and so was the councillor over there, the original way back when. I think we were still in cars then, petrol ones. Well, I'm not quite sure. My mind's gone. But yeah, I you know, people want. We've been talking about Many Down for donkey's years, really, haven't we? And the bottom line is, we bought the land to build houses, and we should be having something directed at when we want to see them. I know that it's a bigger project than just houses, but from my perspective, as a novice, I'd like to say, well, next year it's a yearly thing where you would expect to have started building on houses or something like that.
Well, I agree with you with feeling. Actually, I used to have brown hair. Now I've got grey hair. The leader wants to say something to this.
No, I get the point. I mean, if you started back 30 years ago purchasing the land and was having a performance indicator set against those individuals who spent their years obstructing and placing obstacles in the way of Many Down, it would be fascinating to see who was actually held accountable for the non-delivery of Many Down over those 30 years. However, Indeed. Well, there's one of them who's still a member of the county council, don't forget. And I think he's up for election this year. I don't know where he's standing now. I have to wait and see. There is a logic to the point of a meaningful KPI. I mean, you will appreciate this because of how hard it was to push Many Down through and all the work that you did as a portfolio holder. You appreciate this yourself directly, and I totally respect that. So coming up with a meaningful KPI rather than just a KPI for the sake of a KPI is what we have to think about. And on these kinds of projects, it isn't about, you're right, it's not just about the house building, it's about the placemaking. And that's the point. You're not just building houses for the sake of building houses, you're creating something more than that. I would just want to take away the thought that you've given this evening and think, actually, is there something meaningful in this? And that would be different for every major project you were looking at. It wouldn't be consistent. So again, it would be utterly bespoke to anything that we were looking at in these terms. And as long as you're aware of that, I think it's worthy of having a look to see what could be, but also don't raise expectations beyond what they can't be on a major project that is a partnership with Hampshire County Council at the moment still. And we shouldn't forget that. And we're looking to bring in a partner who will shape a lot of this as well. So there's all these relationships that fit part of these major projects, as you well know.
I think the thing is, yeah, I agree. It's a target, and there may be reasons why the target is not met, but it's still helpful to focus minds, and we're not here in the blame game business, no. So, Councillor Hussey, I think.
Personally, I'd like to go back to a statement you made earlier about milestones. I'd like to see a series of milestones. Well, you could take me on site and say, look, I said that would be done by then, and it's been done by then. That is measurable. When you start talking about risk, I have to believe you. I can't see it, I can't touch it, can't feel it. So I would rather see a number of milestones and the progress against those milestones. So if something's going to be finished by Q1 of whatever year, we can go on site and see it.
Councillor Connor.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just to dovetail into that. Perhaps there's operational KPIs, what you're talking about, and then there's strategic KPIs, which is more about what Paul's talking about. So perhaps we could look at that sort of a compromise.
Excellent. Right. Oh, Councillor.
I mean, this is almost sounding. Sorry, Chair. This is almost sounding like an item in itself. How do we design our major projects KPIs? Because obviously the RAG status isn't doing it. We could have percentages, we could have milestones, we could have this, that, and everything else. But I think it's something that the committee should really take time in designing to get the most out of the understanding of our major projects, as opposed to, you know, having operational KPIs and then thinking, oh, maybe that wasn't quite right, etc. So I think maybe it should go on the work programs to have it as a proper agenda item.
Yeah, I think that's something that the next chair and committee can take from us, inherit our legacy. But in the meantime, I think in the interest of getting a KPI for 26, 27, we'll look to you, Andrew, if that's right.
I'll work with the director and with the leader just to inform, obviously, how we'll shape this for you.
Marvellous. Okay, thank you. Right. So I think we've completed agenda item 4. Unless there's anyone got anything else they want to say at this point. We've got some useful recommendations, I think, that to the officers and the administration. So next item 5 is the officers' ideas for proposed changes to the KPI indicators for 26-27. I must say that I think looking at them, they have taken on board some of the comments we've made in the past about the need for more sort of quantitative evidence to figure in the way that we set out these KPIs. So that's my takeaway from it. But anyway, if I could ask the leader to introduce the report, that would be useful.
Well, that would be my point, really, that we've listened to the committee, we've listened to officers themselves have looked at how particular projects in particular areas have changed, and so the relevance of the actual KPI. And so what you see before you is a series of proposals that relate to all of that as a matrix of choice and how best to reflect this. And as Katie says, the presentation of this will also alter in terms of evolving from what you've already said and what you've shaped with. So thank you very much for all your contributions, and again, listening this evening and taking on board any other further contributions you all want to make. And this is going to be, it's not just now, we don't do this tonight and finish it. This is an iterative process. So it's a continuing conversation as we move.
Yeah, we haven't got long to live though, have we really?
Well, maybe the new council will learn from us in how it chooses to do things in the future, John. Think positively. Maybe we set the standard.
That's the way to look at it. Good. Yes, absolutely. Right. So, we could welcome Mark Lambert up as the first lead officer to talk to the first change that you're proposing. Mark, if you'd like to just set that out so we understand what it is you wish to change.
Of course,
why.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The first change to introduce to you this evening is in relation to KPI 2.01. This measures the council's operational emissions, and so to give you some context, the current target we have for this year, 25-26, is a 5% reduction, and for next year we're looking to reduce that to a 3% reduction. The reason for that, and if I give you a bit of context, our emissions hover around, at the present, around, overall, before you subtract the emissions that are sequestered through the natural environment, we hover around 1,400 to 1,500 tonnes per year. We've reduced it by about 60% since the climate emergency. So we've taken some really significant steps to reduce emissions so far. We've invested heavily in HVO fuel for our waste fleet and other such measures. We're now at a stage where we've done all the things that are in our gift easily, putting aside the Aquadrome and the Tadley Leisure Pool, which account for 60% of our emissions. So they are the really tough nuts to crack. And we've got a plan to crack and replace the Aquadrome, which will significantly reduce our emissions when that comes to fruition in a couple of years. What I'm saying basically is that we don't have a huge number of things that we can do now without spending significantly. So bang for buck, we could reduce, and we could replace a number of our fleet vehicles for electric. It would cost us a lot of money and not reduce emissions that much. I think what we're really waiting for is for the Aquadrome to come into place and to have that significant effect in a couple of years. So by reducing the target from 5% to 3%, We feel it's realistic. It's not going to blow the budget significantly because we recognise that in a couple of years' time we will achieve that target in one fell swoop by replacing the aquadrome. That's not to say we're resting on our laurels. We are still doing significant things. We've changed the heating system in this building recently, and we're looking at putting a heat pump and a hybrid heating system at Tadley Pool, and we are still replacing our fleet as they come to the end of their life. But that really justifies why we think a 3% target is appropriate for the year ahead, Chair.
Right, any questions, comments? Julian.
Yes, I'm not absolutely clear on this percentage thing. If the council estate changes, if we sell buildings or whatever, are we always working off the initial figure whenever we started this exercise, or what remains? It's not absolutely clear to me what we're measuring.
It's based on year-on-year reductions in emissions, and I suppose I need to make the point that it's based upon the buildings where we pay the bill, where we have responsibility for that building. So if we've got a warehouse and we let it out to, a retailer, the responsibility rests with them to pay the bills. So we are just responsible for this building, for Wade Road, and others where we are effectively in control of them, or where we are running a service such as the Aquadrome and Tadley Pool. So it's just those buildings that we consider in our calculations.
Tony.
I'd like to ask a question. What about community centres we own? Are we responsible for those in the KPIs?
Thanks. No, for the community centres that we own, the occupier and the tenant is effectively the community association, so they are responsible for paying the bills and for the emissions associated with that. Having said that, we have taken some positive steps recently to introduce solar panels on a number of the buildings that we own, so we are looking to support those associations to reduce their bills and consequently their emissions.
No.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not hugely in favour of this. I feel like when things, especially the environmental things, are getting difficult, instead of reducing the target, we should be working harder to find solutions. So a reduction of 2%, because as you say, you've made so many changes, it will do the KPI and the bureaucracy a world of good, but it doesn't necessarily mean, can you guarantee that you will carry on working as hard as you have done to carry on those reductions? I mean, it's good to keep the percentages the same so we can see where we're missing it and hold you to account on why we're missing it, as opposed to reducing it down by 2% to then get it to green and continue the status that we've got.
No, I fully recognise where you're coming from then, and to some extent agree with the sentiment of what you're saying. I'm just concerned that we wouldn't want to be spending significant amounts of money on things that only achieve really marginal reductions, such as replacing the fleet, the fleet of vehicles when it isn't ready to be replaced in that sense. We've transitioned to HVO where we can to achieve that. Equally, we don't want to be investing significant sums in a building, for example, where the emissions reductions only achieve marginal changes. So I think that's why we've landed with a 3% reduction. It's something that we feel is achievable and will lead to further reductions when the aquadrome comes to fruition in a couple of years.
Ron.
Have you got notes or a paper or anything that you work to show where we are consuming, what it would cost, such as replacing a whole fleet of vehicles, as you said, what the cost would be? We can't keep expecting you to reach a percentage if we don't approve the spend that's necessary to achieve it. Once you've done all the easy bits, as you suggested, or the bulk of them, achieving the rest becomes significantly more difficult unless you spend money. because there's no easy wins. Now, I understand that, what you said, but is there anything that we could see, a paper, to show to the councillors and the cabinet can get their head around, well, if we spend another 5 million, we can achieve this. Is that worthwhile? That's a decision we should be making and not you.
We take 2 updates to E&I committee each year. One's a full update, one's a kind of lighter touch update to make sure that members have an understanding of where we're focusing our efforts and the spend associated with that. That doesn't necessarily give you the detail of, sorry, that's Environment and Infrastructure Committee. That doesn't necessarily give you the detail you've described, as in, you know, we've got 100 vehicles, it would cost however many pounds to replace them. But it does give a sense of where we're heading and where we want to focus our efforts.
I understand that, but the implication is it will never get to zero because the cost of it is not achievable. And it's, well, I don't know where that is, but I'd like to get a better feel and understanding of what is possible. We'll never get to zero.
Yeah, the thing is,
unless we spend huge sums of money. I want to understand that better.
the thing is, Ron, the goalposts have moved anyway from 2030 to 2045, which is much more profound change in many ways than what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, as a committee, we're not here to determine policy, and that's the privilege of those in the administration, and therefore, if we've made very good progress with this, I think, and they have looked at this on the basis of cost benefit, then. My view is that we should accept this KPI, but with a enjoinder that we look you to exceed it.
Thank you, John. Bearing in mind what the comments this evening, happy to take it away with Mark and go round this again on the basis of what's been said. If there are transparency points around information sharing, data sharing, that should be taken away. It shouldn't be difficult. You're right. I think the easy wins have been had over recent years, and we've got a significant way down the track. The aquadrome will make a dramatic difference. It will totally change the landscape, given the emissions that the old aquadrome currently has, and the implications, the cost implications of that as well. So let's do that, and if we pick it up offline, we'll take that round the houses again and look at the actual implications.
Tony.
I want to pursue the community centres a little bit. The council actually owns them. The community has the inside of the building to maintain, not the outside. And I can't understand why we're not doing something about our community buildings. You know, one, it obviously helps the community building if you've got solar panels on the roof, things like that. And I'm not talking about grants, I'm talking about as a policy. And why, well, I'll ask you, but the leaders there, perhaps it's something we should be looking at. And that would then build your percentage up.
Right, who wants to respond?
I suppose 2 things. I suppose from a consistency point of view, we calculate our figures on a common basis alongside the approach other councils take. We follow a common methodology, and that's focused on the buildings that we occupy and where we've got control over how the building is used. And that, I suppose, brings us on to a second point. We don't know how that building is used and whether, you know, the community centre owners are leaving the windows open or leaving the heating on overnight. That's not in our gift to control that. That's managed by the centre itself. So to some extent, we don't want to be taking on a burden where we have no immediate control over how it's operating and functioning day to day.
I'm honest, I think that's a bit weak, very weak. We know what the community buildings do. We have our officers going in there, and I still believe they should be at the best they can be. and not all community centres can afford to put solar panels on. Depends what area they are, how many rich people live out in the villages. I've seen it, which is fair enough, good luck to them. But I'm afraid my areas, well, we haven't even got a community centre there, but that's another story. But I believe it's something the council should be looking at. I know we don't make policy, so I'll just throw that in.
Yeah, again, there are lots of low-income people in the rural areas. I can assure you, Councillor. Yeah. So it seems to me though that the council is helping with community buildings, providing grants and so forth for solar panels and so forth. But what we're looking at here is where the KPI, which examines the performance of the council, where it has direct control, and I think that's really that should be the test, shouldn't it? Because we haven't got the control of the operation of the buildings with the community centres. So the point being made about the extent to which they're properly managed is out of our hands. So
I would disagree, because that's what you've got your officers going in there.
Well, they're not there all the time, Tony. Yeah, okay, fine. I think we're Councillor Connor. How are you going to help?
Sorry,
here?
I was just reacting to that. I'm with Councillor Jones on this. I mean, if they are our buildings, technically our buildings, then we should have some sort of regulation and control over what they're putting out. I think that's where Tony's coming from.
Thank you. So I think the officers and the leader will no doubt take those points on board, but we're left with this evening whether we're going to accept the recommendation for this change with the KPI, or whether we think that that we recommend they have another look at it. I think they've offered to have another look at it, haven't you? So I think we've made our point, haven't we? Yeah. Yep. Is that right? Good. Fine. Okay. So, Mark, you're not getting away.
I've got a few to go through,
Yet.
so bear with me. This is a kind of a neat segue, because the next one is around the proportion of the council's fleet that is electric. The current target for this year is 12%. Next year we're aiming for 13%. That reflects the view that on a year-on-year basis, only a certain number of our fleet is up for renewal. Some of them are still kind of, roadworthy for a number of years. So they're not all life expired in that sense, and we don't look to replace them, instantly in that sense. We also recognise that a number of our vehicles can't be electric. We run a number of tractors and maintenance vehicles that can only run on diesel or HVO, which we transitioned to a couple of years back. So the target reflects the fact that we are aware that one vehicle is due to be replaced in 26-27, and the KPI has been landed accordingly. We employed created a new role as a fleet manager a couple of years back, and that new officer has now had the opportunity to review the fleet and understand exactly what needs to be replaced and when, and so the KPI reflects his view on that position.
Any comments, anyone? Right, I think that one's we like that one. Okay. Right, keep going. You're on a roll. Come on.
The next one is a very simple one. It's 2.03, and it reflects the fact, the point that was made earlier by you, Chair, around the target for achieving for a net zero borough changing from 2030 to 2045. So it's purely a factual change in that sense to reflect the updated strategy the council adopted last year.
So what's being changed?
The change is that we are looking to achieve a 5% reduction this year and for next year, but the indicator itself, the current one refers to a 2030 target for a net zero borough. The new one refers to a 2045 net zero borough, and that simply reflects the change in target that's set out in the climate change strategy. So it's a very simple change, and we actually look for the same 5% reduction year on year.
I do, yes, yeah. I think. Anyone got any questions on that? No? Okay, good, thank you. Right, 2.04, I think.
The 2.04 relates to the number of borough council funded electric vehicle chargers to be installed in the borough. And I think when we set the target last year, we had the target 60. We were feeling quite ambitious. We had in mind that the Hampshire County Council were due to roll out some on-street EV chargers across the borough. We've been working with them for a couple of years to achieve that, and so far Hampshire haven't achieved any charges in the borough. So to some extent we were being very optimistic in factoring in their contribution to that target, and they haven't delivered on it. I should also say that we've had some issues with SSE in terms of way leave agreements, and that's effectively when you've got an EV charger you have to have an agreement to run a cable under the ground between ourselves and SSE, and there's been some issues in resolving that, which we've now unpicked and resolved and are now able to move forward. So whilst we set the target of 60 last year, I think when we come back to committee a little later in the year, we might have a conversation as to what we have achieved in the current year. The new target is set at 62, which I think reflects those charges in our control. It doesn't include anything by Hampshire County Council, and it reflects the fact we've now addressed the way leave issue.
Fine. Okay. Any questions? Is that your hand up, John? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Is that 62 year on year or in total?
Tony.
Yeah, I think you're correct in what you're saying. We're not here to monitor Hampshire County Council. And at the end of the day, we want to know what we're doing as a council, and I think that's the positive. It's no good looking at something that doesn't quite achieve what we said we were because of other factors outside our control.
They've never been in the figures anyway, have they?
When we set the figure for last year at 60, we did take into account they would deliver some of their charges that were promised. The KPI refers to the number of borough council funded charges, and as we had provided some funding, it reflected that position.
Julian.
Yeah, just curious about the geographic distribution of these. Are these all in the urban area, or do they actually go out in the countryside? I guess in the urban area we have an effective bus service, but that's something we lack in the countryside.
The location of the chargers very much reflects where we've got land assets or property assets, so we can install them either on or alongside, and that's where the limitations arise to some extent. Most of our community centres or car parks are in the bigger settlements, the Basingstoke, the Whitchurches and the Overton, so that's where the chargers tend to be located. We have in recent years started to look at them as part of the PIRA scheme, the parking residential areas, and we've also achieved a target this year of one charger in every ward in the borough, so there are some out there outside of the bigger settlements as well.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly troubled by two more. I feel like a target is something that should be ambitious. It's a target. You know, obviously a bullseye is the smallest part of the dartboard. And just adding on two, and I know this that we're not setting policy and things, but I just feel that there's quite a lot of the environmental parts of the KPI adjustments are light touch, shall I say, and I don't feel like they're ambitious enough, and I will take this away with my colleague Paul later, but I just feel like we are really, you know, almost bottoming of the barrel our targets here. I just want that on record. Yeah, thank you.
I'll just come back. I suppose the point I'd make is that we're no longer factoring in what we thought Hampshire would provide. So we've taken down, you know, if we were setting the target this time last year, we wouldn't have set it at 60. We would have been more realistic and not included anything for Hampshire. So we're playing catch up, I suppose, with our own stock. And that's why it may appear to be an increase of 2, but it's actually more behind the scenes than the figures portray. So I think as a council, we're investing heavily and we've got officers that are working on this full time to make it happen. But I think we're just trying to be realistic around what we think we can achieve.
So how many are missing as a result of Hampshire not?
I think we would have expected to achieve this and some. The target of 60, if Hampshire had delivered, I think we'd be looking more like about 70. And so the target we'd be talking around this evening would be more like 80, 85 for the year ahead.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important to note that point, the claim made that the borough has delivered an EV charger in every ward. When I had a conversation, when that came out in a press release, I had a conversation with one of your colleagues, and for the Evingard ward, there isn't actually a borough council delivered charger in that ward, though the press release did claim that, and actually it's suggested that those people could use Whitchurch. So I think it's very important that that claim is used less, because I didn't think it was necessarily entirely true. What is true is the earlier point about borough council owned land being the complication. In the same conversation with one of your colleagues, I was looking at opportunities for delivering EV chargers in some of the rural parishes in the Evingard ward, looking at some of those parish owned and community trust owned community centres and parish halls. And it is much more complicated there because there are costs that fall onto those smaller organisations that are quite complicated. So, one of the things that I am keen that we sort of together work on is how we can support parish, countryside communities where the borough doesn't own land, and that is something I think I would be keen for this council to think about.
Can I just say, noted my colleagues had given some thought to that kind of issue already and how we could work with a parish hall to perhaps do a pilot project, but it isn't worked out to any great extent, but it's certainly something that we're thinking about behind the scenes, so we can perhaps come back to you at a later date.
Julian.
Yes, Chair. Just in case I've set something running that may give you an impossible target, we can't actually install many more or possibly any more chargers in my village because we're right at the end of the power lines. So I wouldn't like you to have to spend a lot of time trying to find a place to put a charger when it's not possible to actually service it.
Jonathan?
Thank you. I'd just like to pick up Councillor Carr's point about if we're saying that there's a charger in every ward, then there should be a charger in every ward. Is there one in Evingard that people can use?
I'd need to check the detail, but given what Councillor Carr's saying, I understand it's probably a private charger, the likes you might find in a petrol filling station, for example, rather than perhaps a borough council owned one. But let me check that for certain and confirm to you.
Right, thank you. So you have been busy, haven't you, Mark? So we've got more from you now.
We've got a couple here that relate to the Green Team, and as you probably know, the Green Team are the folk that knock on doors and attend events to give out advice on energy saving and the like. The first one is to significantly up the target for the number of people that the team provide advice to. The team have been in place now for at least over 2 years. The target had been 1,300 people per year. We're suggesting we increase that to 2,500. It broadly reflects the number of interactions they have and where advice is provided in person to them. So I think that's really based on robust evidence and what we're finding they can accommodate.
Seems quite a stretch target. So any comments? Mark?
It's more of a technical one. So you're great. You're going to double the. You're aiming. It's a good stretch. Have you targeted your target? If you see what I mean. So do you know which areas would benefit from door knocking, etc.?
Thank you. So it's a good question. We've undertaken a lot of research behind the scenes to understand which areas would most benefit from the advice. We tap into local events when they're taking place to engage across the board, and we look to really spread the offer the Green Team have, but we're very much focused on where people live, where the housing stock is perhaps of a lower quality or more prone to leaking warm air, and perhaps where people are on lower incomes and may benefit from additional hand holding in that sense.
Good, thank you very much. Right, so onwards.
The next one is around we undertake a survey for the Green Team to understand, once they've been to visit someone, given them a survey and spoken to them in detail, we test at the moment how many are planning to take action based upon their interaction. Targets 50% to actually take some action. We're proposing to change it from planning to take action to have taken action. The team's now been in place for a couple of years, as I say, and we feel confident in looking back and making sure that they are doing what they are meant to do, and that the interactions with residents they have actually lead to action being taken by them. So it's a simple change in the target wording, but we feel is now more meaningful, having had the team in place for a couple of years.
I think it seems a good evidence-based change, I would say. So, good. I think everyone happy with that? Good, thank you. Mark.
Sorry, I'll start that again. Apologies. The final one before you this evening is proposed removal of KPI 3.39, which is around the number of EV chargers per head of population in the borough. We had a target of 1 per 100,000 residents, 100 chargers per 100,000 residents. We feel we can safely incorporate that into the EV charging target and report to you on this at the same time. So we can present to you how many chargers we've provided, 62 being the target we're proposing, and at the same time give you a feel for how many chargers per 100,000 residents in the borough. So it's simply combining the two into one. The information about chargers per 100,000 people is available across the board for each local authority area, and we can draw comparisons with our neighbours in West Berkshire, Hart and Rushmore to give you a more rounded view.
Okay, everyone? Good. Aren't you in the chair on the next one? EV chargers to all council-owned community buildings.
Yes, you're right. Sorry, I had missed that one. This is a new target, reflecting the fact that we recognise community centres are they're often the only kind of land asset that we have in some of the rural areas, and we're keen to support those communities as well as those that live in the urban areas. So we propose to approach the community centres across the board to support them in providing EV chargers, with the aim of securing 3 chargers per year in for those community centres. We don't want to force some community centres to take them on because we know there are local issues there where they may not want them, but it's to offer them and then to achieve 3 per year.
Okay.
Yeah, depends where you start.
I'm sure that you think about the whole borough.
Of course I do.
Good.
But we're the only.
What, Evingar? That's a bit of a problem then in terms of getting. Mark, thank you very much for that. Yeah. Right. So the next suggested KPI change relates to household waste recycling rates, and so could Helen come back and join us again? Thank you. So Helen, can you just explain where we are today and what it is that you're proposing and why?
So where we are today is that when we report the KPIs to you, we currently run a quarter behind everybody else, which we recognise is obviously a challenge if, for example, you want to track where we are on trending, particularly given that we need to go on a journey now to reach this 2035, 2042 new targets for recycling and kilograms per household for waste. So with that in mind, what we wanted to do is instead of coming to you with a quarterly report where what we are saying is, well, compared to the last quarter, we've gone up or we've gone down by so many % or kilograms per household. What we want to give you is a running, rolling 12-month total every quarter. So we will come every quarter with a figure, and that figure will be a 12-month rolling total. What that then will allow, we hope, you as committee to see is the journey that we are taking towards the new targets that we need to achieve. So you will be able to see in year, each quarter, where we are against that year's target. And each year we will look at that target to reduce it down so that over the coming period, we reduce the target for kilogram per waste down and we increase the target for recycling. So this is the proposal that we've put forward. And the way that we will achieve that is that at the moment, the cause of the delay is actually the figures that we get for contamination of our waste. But in actual fact, what we've done is we've tracked that over the past few years. And what's become clear is that there is a standing figure that we generally achieve. So we achieve between 26 and 18% on our contamination rate. And when we looked at that, it only equates to 8 tonnes. And when you correlate that 8 tonnes as a percentage of our overall waste, it actually equates to 0.15% of our waste totals. So actually we can quite accurately predict, based on the last year's data, what our contamination rates will look like. So by using a standard contamination rate based on last year's data, we can bring you up-to-date quarterly reporting. And by using a 12-month rolling actual set of data, you will be able to see quarter on quarter where we are in any given year against that annual target, rather than just we've gone up or down compared to last quarter.
So, am I right in thinking then that we are missing there's data from the county that that's late every quarter, but actually it's not very significant in terms of what its overall effect on the statistics. And what you're proposing is that you'll provide us with a quarterly KPI that excludes the county council's part of the equation, but you'll also provide us with an annual one which does include the county's input, but it will always be a quarter behind.
So what we are proposing to do is to use an annualised average figure from last year's contamination, so that instead of waiting for Hampshire to provide us with the figure, we'll just use that annualised number because we know what that number is, and it's an insignificant number.
Okay. Councillor Connor.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just trying to visualise this. So
I have a picture of it.
So what I'm looking at, if I've got this right, what you're looking at is a 12-month trend line, basically. Yes. And you're going to factor into that what you know about the contamination.
Yes.
So that you can bring it up to date on a monthly basis, effectively. So my question would be, why do you need a quarter report then? You just make it a 12-month rolling. Why differentiate between quarters apart from just for informational purposes? Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, so it is literally that. It's so that we can bring a quarterly report to you. And I'm absolutely rubbish at working out dates in my head, but so we would start the Q2 report, for example, in would it be July of last year? So this report or the Q3 report that I would have brought to you now would have been 12 months of rolling data back. And next quarter it would be drop the first 3 months, add the following 3 months, and it would just roll forward. And you can then see all the trending.
Yeah, that's fine. But what I'd be loath to lose is the quarterly information, because there might be some sudden deterioration or improvement in the quarter's results. So, and that might be hidden by just showing it as an annual figure. So I think we'd want both annual and quarter, wouldn't we?
Sorry, Chair, I think we're crossing my understanding is if you see it over a 12-month period, if it's presented as a 12-month rolling period, you'll see the trends. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Well, if that's if it's clear to the rest of you, then how am I to confuse things? Right, Councillor Jones.
Just quick here, it's not about this, I'm quite happy with that. You say the contamination rate. What are we doing about recycling things we don't recycle in there at the moment? Certain pots, certain this, and other councils seem to do it elsewhere. Are we looking at, well, is the county looking at doing it? Because I just think there seems to be a great, you go across the country, different out of the borough, you know, out of Hampshire, and they're recycling stuff that we don't recycle, and you just wonder why. Are we looking at anything like that? That's all.
Yeah, so do you remember that we're part of Project Integra, which is a shared working group across Hampshire? So originally Hampshire's infrastructure was cutting edge when it was put in. What's happened is obviously we've got to the end of life of that infrastructure. So Hampshire are actually in the process at the moment of redeveloping a MRF, a mechanical recovery, something or other. But they're going to rebuild that. It will be installed with the latest technology that will therefore allow us to recycle pots, tubs, trays, but also flexible plastics and all of the things that the government has now included inside the Environment Act. And the idea behind the Environment Act that went through Parliament with cross-party agreement is that from now on, when you live in the UK, in England, you will be recycling the exact same things, whether you're in Norwich or Northumberland or down the road in Newbury. Everybody's going to be doing the same thing, and Hampshire are in the process of updating their infrastructure, and that will come online sometime during 2028, and we're working with them to mobilise that.
No, you can't control Hampshire, but 2028 is a long time in my. Maybe that's because I'm getting old. But.
Okay, so thank you, Helen. I think you've got one other proposed change, haven't you?
And I am proposing to do exactly the same thing with the other figure. So we will use a standardised contamination rate that will allow us to run that calculation for both KPIs. So you will see a 12-month rolling trend period against an annual target.
But the annual target's not changed.
So in terms of the recycling rate, it's 32%. And as you'll see, the quarter that we just reported on, quarter 2, was slightly below that. There's another quarter where we tend to be slightly above it. So the recycling rate is at 32%. We don't yet know, because it's early doors on food waste, what that percentage rate was going to look like. So obviously when it comes to the end of next year, we can look again. If we are achieving that target too easily, we can increase that target. But currently that's our projection.
Okay, I thought we'd moved on to 2.11, which was kilogram of waste per household.
Okay, so on the kilogram of waste per household, that has decreased. So I think we've proposed 506 kilograms per annum. So that will be an annualised figure. So each quarter we will tell you what we're running against, a total figure for the 12 months against that 506.
So if there's less, if the target's less, that means it's the we're achieving the right outcomes.
Yes, and then the idea is that next year we should see further reductions as more people take up the food waste, and then we'll drop the total down again.
See, I understood that. Right. Anything else? No. Julian.
So basically you'll reduce year on year until you reach this 272 in 2045. Yep. Okay, fine.
Helen, thank you very much for that. So we can now move on to Katie, I think. Your proposed changes to the KPIs, Katie, if you could explain what you have in mind.
So currently we have a customer experience strategy, and that was running from 2023 through to 2026. So what I'm proposing here is that we're still monitoring a strategy which will be created, but it's a broader strategy that incorporates our digital activity and also around the innovation side of things, rather than purely looking at the sort of customer aspect. So the current strategy has developed areas such as the complaints, how we handle complaints and monitor them, the improvements to the website, the introduction of the new CRM. So it had elements of more IT aspects in it. But what we're doing now as a body of work is working with service areas. For instance, we've been doing a deep dive with our planning colleagues and looking at it both from the customer journey perspective, the systems that they use, where the opportunities are there to be a bit more innovative. So it's really to reflect that kind of more all-encompassing work, because we all know the technology is a huge lever in what we can achieve for customers and for the council in terms of working efficiently. And that in turn leaves us time to deal with the customers that need us to. But it's just looking at it in a more holistic manner. So it's not taking one thing away and not replacing it, it's just bringing what we're looking at in our strategy up to date.
Any questions? I think the problem I have with this is that the last KPI is a case of implemented on time, and this one is just going to say on track, and it's somewhat sort of opaque, really. It's not really setting out any deliverables from this. It's just going to say, well, we're on track or we're not, and I don't find that sort of terribly convincing.
I mean, this strategy has got to be written, so you could have one that says to create it and have it endorsed. That wouldn't take you through the entire year. But I could amend the wording so it has a slightly more milestone approach to it, although it's not a project in that way, but to try and make it less opaque, and so it's clear what you're reporting on each time it comes to be considered.
Councillor Carr.
And would we, as a committee, review that document in draft before it goes to Cabinet, just so that we can consider, because obviously it will affect, when it's implemented, how our residents interact with the council. So I think we probably want to know what that looks like, particularly if there's a greater emphasis on digital and how that might potentially impact people who are not very digital minded.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry. Yes, it could come to this committee, but to be clear, I'm not proposing channel shift here. That's not what this is about. It's making better use of the digital tools rather than saying you can't phone up about your bin, you have to do that online. That's not what this is about. But yes, it could come here, obviously, for that scrutiny.
Just to be really clear, there is an absolute policy direction from us that we are not moving away from customer contact in that way. Totally respect the question, and it's a good question, because county are, and county have, for example, on the services associated where you have to do them online. You can no longer ring up the county. We aren't going there. Residents have to be able and should be able to ring up the borough council and have a contact with us. New council, new choices, but while we're here in the borough council, we'll continue in that fashion. This includes things like AI and how we use other technologies, and get to bring that to a session with yourselves is perfectly fair. We're happy to do that.
Yeah, okay. I think that'd be helpful, Katie, because on track is rather indeterminate and is rather subjective. Whereas if you had some milestones or something key in there, that would make it more real, I think, in terms of reporting deliverable. Okay, thank you. We now turn to Tom Payne, I think. Is that right? Yep. Tom. So this is Environment and Community Services, and there are a number here from you, Tom. Please, if you could be good enough to take us through your proposed changes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. So I think the first one is KPI 2.13. So at the moment we have a KPI which measures the total area of land that's managed for biodiversity each year, and the target linked to that is a year-on-year increase. I'm pleased to say that we've consistently met that target for as many years as I can remember. But it doesn't actually measure effectively the quality of the biodiversity improvements we're making. And different sites require different interventions at different times. So you might do one type of land management one year, so coppicing. That might not be needed for several more years into the future. So again, it's not a linear thing. You're not doing the same thing year on all of these sites. As a result, the area needing intervention could vary year to year, and that creates a risk that you could fail the KPI because the actual area of land that we've actively managed that year may be less than the year before. But if it's all the land that we needed to carry out, then it would seem to be quite odd that we would fail a KPI when all of the land management that you needed to carry out was done. So what we are suggesting is that we link this instead to the management plans that we have for these sites. So at the moment, every year to review the plan on a yearly basis and agree what management is needed on each of those sites. Some of that management might be by the council's rangers team, some of it by grounds maintenance, and some of it by conservation volunteer groups. And that is managed and monitored by the ranger team throughout the year. So it's proposed that we change and move away from a KPI that tracks the actual quantity of land that we're managing to focus instead on the biodiversity improvements that we are seeking to deliver through the management plans, which are very much targeted at how can we improve and enhance biodiversity on the land that we have control over. That's it in a nutshell, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, members? No, that seems... Oh, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. How would you indicate the improvements to the biodiversity in the KPI? How would you show that to us?
So the team that are responsible for writing the management plans, obviously primarily is our ranger team, in conjunction with conservation volunteer group. So you've got an awful lot of expertise in that group of people, not just council officers, but also including some of our conservation volunteer groups as well, with all that knowledge, which goes into helping to direct what interventions needed on different sites to enhance biodiversity. It's very difficult to give an exact measure to say that you're going to go from X quantum of value to Y. What we can say is that we are assessed sometimes by not companies, but organisations like Hampshire Biodiversity Information Centre, HBIC, which look at some of our sites on a regular basis and will comment on the management. So we've had some very positive comments about the actual tangible biodiversity improvements they've seen in terms of species diversity due to the land management practices that we are delivering out and about, not just us, but obviously with conservation volunteers across the borough. So there's some really positive outcomes that we can share because, as I say, these assessments are done periodically. But as I say, it's very much informed by what professionals, say council staff plus the conservation volunteers, deem to be the appropriate management on each site, that come up with that action plan for the year in terms of management that we then work together to deliver.
So obviously at the moment it's done on a hectare, or it's done on a percentage of council land. What does that actually look like in the report when you feed it back to us so we can scrutinise the work that you've done?
Very happy to continue to provide that level of information as part of that reporting, so we can continue to say it would be an annual target, so we will reflect this at the year-end position, and as part of that we can say, yes, we have achieved over 85% of the actions that were identified this year in terms of all that management activity have been delivered, hopefully. But we can also, as part of that narrative, include that, and that equates to this amount of land where land management was carried out. So we could continue to sort of weave that into our narrative for the year-end position.
Councillor Carr.
So the 85% figure interests me in terms of the actions identified across all of the site management plans. I think you mentioned there were 32 or so of those. So potentially we're going to be presented with a figure that says, 80%. But underneath that, you could find some that are kind of 100% all done, and others that are very far behind. So I'm just wondering how, when the committee looks at this next time, the committee can see the difference between those, the sort of those that are performing well and those that aren't. And is there potentially some sort of appendix that might need to be attached to that, or some kind of breakdown of the 32, so you could see the percentage for each one? Because I think we're not in a KPI meeting going to want to go through all of those in turn, but if there are 2 or 3, say, that are hitting a sort of 30% performance, they may be selectively the ones we want to talk about in the meeting. So maybe there's something about drawing out the list of 32 and the percentage next to that.
Yep, I'm very happy to give that some careful consideration. We are limited in terms of how many words we can put in our description, so we're limited in that sort of sense. But I could certainly give a flavour in terms of the reporting to say, if you like, the site with the lowest percentage of completions was, I'm not going to say it's any lower than 70% at this point. Or, give you a range and say, well, actually, yes, the site that had perhaps the lowest percentage of completed actions was this one, and then you get that sort of feel for, are there some outliers? Are there some sites that I don't think there will be? Is the short answer to that. I don't think there will be. I think there's quite a high level of performance already across all the sites we're managing. But yeah, I'm certainly happy to sort of try and give you a bit fuller explanation when I come back to present the outcome for 26, 27 even.
Or you could have something that's allied to the 85% target, which is that certain number wouldn't fall below a certain level.
I'm happy to take that one away and give that some further thought.
Why did you come up with 85%, just out of interest?
I think the 85% kind of reflects the fact that sometimes there are factors that are outside our control. So weather being one of the key ones. A lot of the land management activity you want to carry out, particularly for conservation purposes, you've got a very narrow window of opportunity to do that. And if it's pouring with rain for months on end, as we've just experienced, sometimes that can interfere with the work you want to do, and you're really limited at what you can do. So weather is a factor. Obviously, we are also reporting on the activities, not just that we're doing as a borough council staff, the people we employ to go out and do this sort of work, but we're also reflecting on the work delivered by the conservation volunteer groups as well. Again, and that's not sort of directly within our control. Sometimes there are factors which influence what they can and cannot do. But again, it's just seen as taking those two things into account, to come up with the 85%, to say that gives us that sort of ability to flex depending on the circumstances in the year.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Right, any more on that one? No. So we'll move on then, Mark.
So the second one, again, quite consistent with some of my colleagues, trying to give you a bit more clarity in terms of what the indicators actually set at. So 2.14, the current target for this particular indicator is a year-on-year increase. This reflects on the amount of time spent by conservation volunteer groups. It also includes time that's spent by the corporate work parties and also community payback. So they're all factored into this figure in terms of the number of hours of conservation work carried out by effectively volunteers. But instead of just saying it's a year-on-year increase, all we're saying in this proposal is that we will reflect what the actual target is, which is at least a 5% increase in the number of hours for the forthcoming year.
Julian?
It strikes me that you could be setting yourself quite a difficult target to meet here. I think in some of the larger groups, they will have a formal time when they come together and they can monitor the number of people volunteering. In some of the smaller areas, it's probably done on a best efforts basis. And in those areas as well, often you find one or two individuals who make a very large contribution. If they move away, they leave a gap that's very difficult to fill. And it just strikes me this may be a very difficult measure to deal with. Do you have experience that suggests it is achievable?
I think this one came into place probably a couple of years ago now. That this is a relatively new indicator that we added. What we certainly have done is invested heavily in the ranger service primarily that support a lot of the conservation groups and help to set up new groups where there's a willingness within the community to take on some of that sort of activity. So we have grown that quite considerably in the last 2 years, especially, possibly longer, 3 years. Big sizable gains every year in terms of the actual number of hours. It's been phenomenal, really, what that increase has been over recent years. I do think we are probably reaching a slight plateau because, you know, the groups have been set up. A lot of those groups are established. We are looking at what more we can do to increase that participation, because it's obviously got lots of benefits for the people involved in carrying out the work as well. So we are keen to keep increasing that work as much as possible.
Mark?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's the saturation point that I'm concerned with. As you said, as you pointed out, you've had a big spurt in growth in terms of hours. But are you not in danger of overreaching this one because you might have hit the number of people that are available who can provide that amount of time, if you see what I mean? That would be my worry.
I didn't expect to get pushback in terms of agreeing a lower target. I really hadn't prepared for that one, but I'm quite happy to accept a lower target if it makes life easier. Again, I think it is realistic. You know, we have seen quite substantial gains in recent years. I do absolutely take the point, and we do absolutely accept that we might be reaching that plateau point. We still want to strive to increase that opportunity for people. So, you know, if we set the standard, the target where it is at 5%, then I'm happy with that.
Right, Tony.
Just, aren't you setting yourself up? You were saying earlier about biodiversity, weather, everything else, but that will affect volunteers. You know, we haven't had snow for years, but we can get it, and you'll be failing. I think the whole thing, I don't know how you measure volunteers really, if I was honest with you, because are you failing because people don't turn up, or are you failing because they've moved away and died, or whatever? You know, I don't get it, if I'm honest with you. It's good that people volunteer, and we should recognise that. But this KPI, I really can't really see the point of, if I was honest with you.
Paul?
Just listening to the conversation, I mean, the idea of a year-on-year increase without a defined percentage is one thing. If committee are comfortable with that, then we could look at that again, Tom. I think if the point being it can be reached and we're encouraging volunteering because it's a good thing to do to encourage volunteering, then necessarily having a stretch target that we might fail. But this isn't the blame game. You said that earlier yourself, Chair. This is not about blaming anybody. Is the stretch target meaningful? Does it actually have a relevance to the conversation? If Tom takes that offline with the portfolio holder, be happy to think about the comments you've passed and maybe reflect on this one, if you're comfortable with that as committee and you think that's reasonable.
Councillor Carr?
Yes, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I broadly agree with Tony on this one. I'm not necessarily sure this should be a KPI, actually. I think if we're in the business of reviewing what the council as a public body does, then a lot of the KPIs we've been talking about and our direct responsibilities are quite important. But what we're doing here is we're trying to put a number and a trajectory on something that we wish to encourage, but which is ultimately something in the third sector, in the community. And so I'm not sure we should really be putting a number on something like that. So I'd be content for this to go, actually. And then for the question of volunteering, and ultimately the improvement of biodiversity to come out in the previous KPI that we've been talking about in terms of management plans.
How funny, I disagree actually. I think one of our roles as a council is to encourage and work and educate in the community, and therefore I think this is valuable work, and if we can get enthusiasm from volunteers to do that, then it's good. It's a good reflection on us as an organisation if we're able to increase the amount of volunteering that we're able to achieve in the borough. So that's my view, and I think it's a stretch target. It's come from you, and so if you're confident, nobody's going. If you don't hit it, then we're not going to be sort of chastising you in a year's time. We certainly wouldn't do that. But anyway, what do we think, committee? Do we want to go forward with this one, or let's have a vote? Don't usually have a vote. Do we want to go forward with this one, or not? Those in favour that it goes. You want to say something? No.
I just want to see the council take an active role in encouraging volunteers, because with volunteers you begin to develop an ownership by the public, and that's what I want to see encouraged. Now, how we measure that, how we achieve it, not to be held to ransom if you fail, but to be putting the effort in, education, training or equipment, whatever it takes to increase the core of volunteers, so that our rangers become managers, and they're not doing it themselves, they're managing loads of volunteers.
Yeah, well,
more ownership by the public.
That's what this is doing, I think.
Yeah.
Jonathan.
I've got some skin in the game. I'm in two of the conservation groups that Tom's been talking about tonight, and the way that they measure the hours of volunteers is how long the group is and how many people turn up. The rangers do that through their own ways. So, I mean, I don't think we need to worry about kind of how we're getting to the numbers and things. We just need to make sure that these things are being encouraged.
Yes.
And I do think that reporting on them year on year is a good idea to find out, you know, if one year it does drop, what can we do to then start bringing it back up again? So I would like to very much see it go forward.
Good, thank you. Right, can we agree to that then? Yeah. Okay, right, fine, Tom. Thank you very much. It is. Sarah. Now, Sarah, I feel I owe you an apology actually, because it's my fault. We should have asked you to address this much earlier on, and you sat there patiently. So I do apologise for that. But
no apologies necessary.
So.
Okay, so in terms of the proposal is to increase the sickness target from the current 1.95 days per quarter to 2.35 days per quarter. So it's increasing it by 0.4 days each quarter. So the figure is based on a 2025 report by the CIPD, which is the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, so that's my professional body, which looked at absence levels nationally. And again, in that report, they reported another record high absence of, on average, 9.4 days a year. So that equates to the 2.35 that I'm proposing. I think it's really important to say that that figure in that report covers all sectors, so public, private and voluntary, not-for-profit. The private sector average by itself is 9.1 days. So this proposed target is only 0.3 days higher than that. And I think the reason that I'm putting it forward, whilst I'm very happy to come here and talk about sickness every quarter, and I genuinely am, my concern is that when we consistently miss the target, even by a small amount, it gives a view about our officers and the level of sickness absence that they have, and that they're missing a target and therefore they're not at work and working for an inappropriate amount of time. But if the target stays as it is currently, that means our target would be 1.3 days lower than the private sector. All of the evidence is that public sector sickness is always higher than that in the private sector, but not only are we not benchmarking it against the public sector, we're not even benchmarking and keeping track with what's happening in the private sector. So it gives the view that our staff and our officers are absent for an unacceptable amount of time when actually, potentially, they're absent for less time than colleagues in the private sector. So that's why I've put it forward, because I think currently it gives a disproportionate view of what the level of sickness absence of our officers means.
Thank you. Yes, I checked the private sector sickness rates, and I was surprised at how high they are nowadays. But anyway, committee members, any questions or observations?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think lining things up with the evidence that is the national evidence in terms of KPIs is the right way forward. I don't think we should be trying to set targets that are not realistic. So I totally agree with this.
Tony?
I'd go along with that, I think.
Okay. Fine, Sarah, I think we support that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, committee members, much appreciated.
Right, so I think we can thank the leader for his attendance tonight, and I think that in terms of the KPIs, they're obviously important measures of performance, which is absolutely vital in any organisation. We've made some useful contributions tonight, which I hope will see the light of day. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, now we have recommendation tracker. Ellie, can I turn to you?
So, good evening, members. So this is the recommendation tracker that goes to each of the overview and scrutiny committees every quarter, and it's just to confirm all of the actions and recommendations that have been made so far this year. We've only got one ongoing at the moment, which is a response that we are waiting for from the Cabinet Member for Finance and Property in regards to Southam Community Centre. I've since spoken to him since the publication of the agenda, and I'm now following that up with officers, so hopefully that should be circulated with the responses from this meeting as well. So it's just for noting.
Yeah, I think that was some information that's important for us to have, particularly for you representing Southam, and the fact that it hasn't been provided is a bit disappointing, to say the least. So I would hope that it would emerge quite quickly now, wouldn't you? Yes, yeah. It's not an unreasonable request, so I'm sure it's just an oversight on the part of the co-leader. Right. And then a review of the work programme. Well, of course, the committee is going to be subject to change after the May elections and so forth, and so this is really just a sort of recommendation, a legacy offering to whoever succeeds us on this committee. So I think we have requested previously that we want an update on IT, don't we? Is that right? So is that coming next? Right. Is there anything else, Ellie? Any other proposals? I think we can include what we came up with tonight in relation to what was it? The major projects and KPIs, wasn't it? Yeah. And also enforcement by the planning department. So we're bequeathing all these sorts of interesting topics to our successors. Maybe most of us here. We shall see. I don't know. Right. Okay. Anything else, Councillor Carr?
Only that I think there may be cause to put a local government reorganisation paper in this. If we're going to see the government's decision on that either this side of Purda or later in May, either way, I think our successor committee will want to look at what the government is proposing and how that will be implemented over time. So there's probably something to note there. The date will have to be determined based on how things progress internally, but I think that's something we need to note down.
Yep, I think it's a good suggestion. Right, okay. I think we can call it a day. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance and contribution.
So thank you. You've done a good job this year. I've enjoyed sitting on this committee. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. It's always, as a Conservative, it's always good to get some praise from a member of the Labour Party.
It's unusual. We're usually fighting, me and you, so